पेज फिटिंग नहीं हो रही। हाँ ठीक है, अब ठीक है। जय ओम विष्णुपद परमहंस परिव्रजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शतशी श्रीमद् ऐसी भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। नामाचार्य श्रील हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवास आदि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय। मायापुर धाम की जय। जगन्नाथपुरी की जय। गंगा माई की जय। जमुना माई की जय। तुलसी महारानी की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Today we're continuing the reading of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, written by His Holiness Satsrup Das Goswami. We're on volume 4, entitled In Every Town and Village. And we're on chapter 4, India, Dancing White Elephants. So Srila Prabhupada, he had arrived with 5 devotees from Tokyo, Japan, to Calcutta. Prabhupada had 2 main missions to accomplish when he arrived in Calcutta. He wanted to get land in Mayapur to make a temple there, just as all of his godbrothers had done. And he wanted to make a temple in Calcutta. But he wasn't having much success or much cooperation. None amongst his godbrothers were willing to help him in Mayapur. He had gone there. He had stayed at the Devananda Gaudiya Math with his godbrothers and his disciples, his godbrothers' disciples. They took care of the 17 devotees very nicely. At the end of a 15-day trip, Prabhupada asked Tamal Krishna to give a donation. He gave 10 rupees. And then, because the rains were starting, they decided that they better get back before everything becomes completely flooded in Navadvip. They were in Navadvip. They were trying to go to Mayapur, but because the river had raised so high, they couldn't even get from Navadvip to Mayapur. So they went to the Navadvip train station and they boarded a train that was completely packed because everyone was trying to get out of the flooded area. Then the rains returned. Day after day the rains came, and the Ganges rose higher and higher until crossing the swift river into Mayapur became impossible. Since the rains were not likely to abate soon, Prabhupada decided to leave. He and his disciples boarded an early morning train to Calcutta. The tracks were flooded. Repeatedly, the train had to stop, once for more than 8 hours. The heat and the crowds of passengers constantly passing through the car made the wait torturous for the devotees. Prabhupada asked one of his disciples to take a rickshaw and try to arrange better transportation. Nothing was available. At last, the train continued toward Calcutta, only to stop at the next station, where all the passengers changed to another train. Finally, Prabhupada reached Calcutta and Mr. Das Gupta's home. So, how many of you have ever been stuck in Mayapur during a flood? Anyone here? You have, yes. Are you from Bengal? Yes. Yeah. Very dangerous. We've lost devotees to the rains, just carried away by the river. One time we had to take Pishima from Mathura to Calcutta. And In those days, it was a 3-day train ride, 2 nights and 3 days. As soon as we hit Bengal, train stopped. Engine broke down, train stopped. Everyone had to get out of the train, just like here. You have to get out of the train, and then they have local trains. Local trains all open with the big fish baskets, going to the market with all their fish. All the people, we had to get out, we had to carry Pishima on the tracks, get into one of these local trains to get her to her home in Calcutta. Very difficult. This is why during Chaturmas, it's recommended that the holy places, they stay in one place and they preach to the residents of that holy place. And Prabhupada highly recommended that. No traveling during Chaturmas. It's much too dangerous. One of our very wealthy life members from Kanpur, when Prabhupada was here, very philanthropic. He used to try to help the flood victims like we're having now in Assam. Hundreds of thousands of people are displaced, the animals are dying. So they would go and try to help the people during the floods, and they themselves died in the flood. So we're very fortunate. We're here in Vrindavan, and we can stay here. Chaturmas has just begun 2 weeks ago. And we use this time. Prabhupada gave a very nice description of how this time should be used, Chaturmas, to serve the pure devotees in the holy dham by menial service, any type of service you can do. And that way you'll make spiritual advancement. And he gave the example of Narada Muni. Narada Muni was a young boy, and the Bhaktivedantas had come because it was Chaturmas, and he got to serve them, bring them prasadam, do any type of menial service. And after taking their permission, he would get the remnants of their food. And that way he was able to attain spiritual perfection and become the incarnation of bhakti-yoga in his next life. So here we have Prabhupada trying to get to Calcutta. He finally made it after having to get out of one train, go to another train. He's back at his patron's house, Mr. Dasgupta. Okay, next. Working. Oh, okay. All right, thank you. Maybe Lord Chaitanya does not want us to establish our headquarters in Mayapur, Prabhupada said. The two purposes in his mind, establishing a place in Calcutta and purchasing land in Mayapur, he had not accomplished. Prabhupada continued holding programs in people's homes and talking with guests in his room. One day, a Mr. Dandaria visited Prabhupada and mentioned Bombay's upcoming Sadhu Samaj, a gathering of the most important sadhus in India. It was to be held at Chopati, a beach neighborhood, and promised to be a big affair. Mr. Dandaria requested Prabhupada to attend, and Prabhupada accepted. So Mr. Dandaria, anyone who's lived in Calcutta, they know many Marwaris live there for business purposes. They're the Bengalis, and they're the Marwaris. They like to make a lot of money, very wealthy, very well connected, originally coming from Rajasthan, and then wherever there's money, they set up their businesses. So Calcutta, Bombay, two favorite places. So Mr. Dandaria, he was in Calcutta, and just to help Prabhupada, he recommended to him, why don't you go to this Sadhu Samaj? And he had his relatives in Bombay who were going to put up Prabhupada's, all the devotees that Prabhupada was traveling with. Very nice arrangements they made. So Prabhupada accepted the invitation. We now have a beautiful temple in Chopati. Radhanath Swami, he has that temple there. And also at that place is the Munshis, the Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan, just nearby. And this Sadhu Samaj, tens of thousands of people attended it. So it would be a good opportunity for Prabhupada to introduce his white elephants to the Bombay residents. Now, again, Prabhuji? Just like that, okay. Thank you. Bombay, October 1970. Responding to Srila Prabhupada's request for more disciples to join him in India, a group of 20 American devotees traveled to Brussels, Brussels is in Belgium, and took an inexpensive flight aboard a propeller-driven craft to Bombay. At the airport, while the devotees were wondering where they should go, Mr. Kailash Seksaria, a wealthy Bombay businessman and nephew of Mr. Dandaria, approached them with a letter from Prabhupada. Mr. Seksaria had arranged for several cars, and he escorted the devotees to his home in an affluent Bombay residential area on Marine Drive. He fed them and provided them with living quarters. So you see this picture here. This picture is in Egypt, in Cairo. What Srila Prabhupada did was, at that time in America, we had about 14 temples. Plus we had a temple in London and a temple in Germany. So most of the devotees, and also in Canada, we had Montreal. That was, and Tokyo. So Prabhupada was coming from Tokyo. He was bringing devotees from there. Already three devotees were in India. That was Achyutananda, Ramanuja, and Jaipataka. So Prabhupada had a group of devotees with him, but Prabhupada wanted a big group. So he wrote letters. He said each devotee should send one of their prominent devotees to India. So each of our temples, it was usually the second in command that was sent. The temple president couldn't go. From our temple, we sent our Sankirtan leader. His name was Madhavananda. From Boston, they sent Giriraj. He was just the assistant to Satsru. And in that way, and Gopal, who just recently left his body, he was sent. So in that way, these devotees, 20 American devotees, they all went to Brussels. They all took cheap flights. And anyway, anyhow, they got to Europe, to Brussels. And one devotee who had joined in London, he ran an airlines, very inexpensive cargo airlines called Bosco. And that Bosco, they had old airplanes from World War II that had a propeller on each wing. And they would send these propeller planes from Brussels to Cairo, to Yemen, and then finally they would reach Bombay. There were no seats, and there were goats and chickens and all different types of cargo in the plane with the devotees. And the pilots were right in front in the airplane with just a shutter as the cockpit, no door even. So this picture is when the devotees landed in Egypt. And as we know, Egypt is a Muslim country. And just a few days before, there was a hijacking. And after the hijacking, the president of Egypt had called all of the League of Arab Nations to Egypt to make a peace treaty. President Nasser, he had arranged all of this. And the day after, everyone signed the peace treaty so there would be no more hijacking, no more murders, no more hostages. He died of a heart attack. And the whole world was in mourning of President Nasser. All the black flags were everywhere. Everything was shut down. And here comes the Bosco airplane full of 20 completely ecstatic devotees. They're on their way to India to see Prabhupada. They have no idea what's going on in the world. They never heard of President Nasser, nothing. They get off of the plane, and with all of the soldiers aiming their, not just rifles, but machine guns at the devotees, Giriraj starts jumping up and down and starts a Sankirtan party. Nobody could figure out where these people came from. And not only, he doesn't stop there. He grabs two of the policemen and puts their arms up in the air and has them jump up and down with him. So here they are. You can see their machine guns with the policemen holding the guns in front of them and the devotees dancing in ecstasy. So this was their first stop in Cairo. Now, let's see if I can't do it. Okay, fine, good. So the devotees were coming. They landed in Bombay, and Mr. Dandadia's nephew, Mr. Sekshadia, he had the letter from Prabhupada telling the devotees to go with Mr. Sekshadia to his opulent home in Marine Drive. Marine Drive is the nicest part of Bombay, just on the ocean. When we went to preach in Bombay, this first thing Prabhupada told us, you go to Marine Drive and you make life members, you distribute books there. Prabhupada used to do that, and all the embassies were there. So Prabhupada's arrival was postponed once or twice because he was in Calcutta. He was still trying to get the land in Mayapur because he didn't want to leave Calcutta until something was accomplished. And this increased the devotees' anticipation. Finally, a telegram said he was coming. After an enthusiastic reception at the airport, well, actually, the enthusiastic reception at the airport, Gurudas by that time had come because Gurudas had gone to Brussels and he had brought the first lot of devotees on the Basco Airlines. But four devotees were stuck in America and they were coming the next day. So Shyam Sundar stayed back and he waited for those four devotees and brought them on the next plane. So Gurudas, he was in charge in Bombay. And he decided that we will have the big reception when Prabhupada arrives at Mr. Sekshadia's house. So he only sent Shyam Sundar to pick up Prabhupada. And Prabhupada was surprised. Where are all the devotees? Usually there's a big reception at the airport. So after an enthusiastic reception at the airport, none of the devotees were there. Prabhupada rode with Mr. Sekshadia to his home. Marine Drive runs along the seashore, and the houses lining it belong to the very rich. Mr. Sekshadia's residence was 7 stories, and he offered Srila Prabhupada the first floor, with its large rooms overlooking the Arabian Sea. So the picture we see here is the gala welcome for Srila Prabhupada in Bombay, September 29th, 1970. So this is Mr. Sekshadia coming out of the car, and Prabhupada, he'll be alighting, and all of the people that, because the devotees had arrived 1 or 2 weeks earlier, they were already going on house programs, they were doing Sankirtan in the streets, already there was a large gathering to meet Prabhupada just by the devotees preaching in the last 2 weeks. Nope. Okay. No. That's went backwards. This. Yes. Okay. Bombay, Prabhupada said, was India's most materialistic city. It was the nation's movie capital and the city where, more than any other Indian city, the people wore Western dress. The gateway to India, it boasted the most industries, the most businesses, and the most billboards. It was a cosmopolitan melting pot of cultures and religions, but had none of the Naxalite terrorism of Calcutta or the heavy political atmosphere of New Delhi. Nor did it have the aristocratic families who worshipped Lord Chaitanya and his Sankirtan movement, but it had its own advantages for preaching, Prabhupada said. It was a city of wealth, with many pious citizens who were intelligent and quick to adopt to a good idea. He predicted Bombay would be a favorable city for Krishna consciousness. Now, not only did Prabhupada predict this, but Srila Prabhupada himself had lived in Bombay previously, before he went to America. He had done a lot of preaching and groundwork to make acquaintances and to develop Krishna consciousness in Bombay already. He had many contacts in Bombay, especially from Scindia ship lines, and all of the people that he had gone, because he had been made the leader of the Gaudiya Math. He got the building for the Gaudiya Math, and they wanted him to be the temple president. They asked Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati refused. He said, no, you wait. He will do in his own time, because Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati knew what Prabhupada was going to do in the future. So now that Prabhupada had come back to Bombay, which was like another home for him, he already had many contacts, and he was having the devotees go to these contacts, and he developed a life membership program. Prabhupada called Bombay the financial capital of India. And there's a theory, not really a theory, it's actually a rule, that the further west you go, the more materialistic life is. So we'll start on the eastern side of India. That's, let's say, where Lord Chaitanya's movement began. And the further west you go, so the furthest west in India is Bombay, most materialistic city in India. Then you go further west, and you come around the world, and then you have China, which is the most materialistic, most abominable cultures, eating cockroaches and all types of abominable things that we can't even imagine. And there you have that theory. So within India, you had the most materialistic, the wealthiest, financial capital and movie capital of India. So Prabhupada, his idea was that Vedic culture, that's India, but the people have renounced their Vedic culture and they're looking to the West. They want to copy the West. So he wanted to bring his American disciples back to India to show the Indian population that you're looking to the West. The Westerners, they have adopted your culture. So you should adopt your culture now too. And it worked. Here we all are. This is Prabhupada at one of the house programs. Okay. Prabhupada's first Bombay preaching engagement was at a gathering of sadhus, a pandal in an open field just a few blocks from Mr. Seksharia's home. That's the Chopati beach. They built a huge pandal there for 10,000 people, and that was where the sadhu sammelan was going to be. Prabhupada's disciples had also been invited, and they arrived several hours before Prabhupada. The array of Indian sadhus sitting on stage in long rows startled the devotees. Some of the sadhus were bearded, some shaven-headed, some with long matted hair, holding tridents, some covered with ashes, some adorned with beads and clay markings. The devotees were amazed, and many of the sadhus, on seeing the white-skinned Vaishnavas, were also amazed. No, ये पीछे है, आगे जा, आगे, ये पीछे है, ये, हाँ, ये, all right, हाँ, और, हाँ, वो, ये, ठीक है. When the devotees came on stage and began their kirtan, the audience responded by clapping in rhythm and chanting. Afterwards, on the advice of Mr. Seksharia, the devotees took their kirtan out into the streets, and many in the audience followed. That evening, the devotees returned to the pandal with Prabhupada. Prabhupada sat on a raised platform, and his disciples sat at his feet. After having 3 of his disciples speak in English, Prabhupada spoke in Hindi, while the audience of more than 500 listened silently. After his lecture, he came down from the platform, and a crowd gathered around him, touching his feet and following him to his car. So this is the beginning of a long program. Every night, the sadhus, they would speak, and the devotees would also sit on the stage with Srila Prabhupada, and they would always save the devotees for the last presentation. So the devotees would have to sit through these long lectures in Hindi, but everyone was waiting for the end. When Prabhupada, he would just speak for 5 or 10 minutes, and then the kirtan would start. And all the audience would become so enthusiastic by that kirtan. Eventually, the devotees went into the audience themselves and got everyone up dancing with them. There must be a better way to do this. Okay. When Prabhupada heard from his disciples of their spontaneous kirtan through the streets of Bombay, he said they should go to the busiest bazaars and chant daily. So they did. Wherever large numbers of people gathered, the devotees would go and chant. They were strong, youthful, exuberant, and faithful, and they would chant in the streets for 3 or 4 hours each day. So this was the devotees' life. All the devotees who were coming from America and Europe, this was all they did. They would chant in the streets. We would go out up to 8 hours a day. Sometimes we would go out in the morning, come back for prasadam, and then we'd go out again in the evening. Because this is how we were spreading Lord Chaitanya's mission, by the Sankirtan program. So the devotees were already accustomed to this lifestyle. But the crowds, I mean, in the foreign countries, maybe you get a few people watching. But here in India, hundreds and hundreds of people will come because they were so astounded by the foreign devotees now chanting and wearing dhotis and saris and tilak. They'd never seen anything like that before. So they drew huge crowds. we go. This, okay. Although Prabhupada did not physically go into the streets chanting with his disciples, he was with them by his instructions and by his presence before they went out in the morning and when they returned in the evening. They were chanting because he had told them to, and they knew that chanting was the natural activity of the soul. Everyone should chant. The devotees knew that at the end of life they would go back home, back to Godhead. And better than that, at the end of the day, they would go back to Marine Drive to Prabhupada, who would smile and encourage them. So what was Prabhupada doing while all the devotees were out? Well, he was working on his books. He had a life mission. He had to finish the translation of Srimad Bhagavatam. So while the devotees were out chanting in the streets, spreading Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement, Prabhupada was there. Morning time, we had the morning program with Prabhupada, Mangalarti, then Srimad Bhagavatam, Prasadam, out on the streets chanting, coming back. We'd also have the evening program with Srila Prabhupada. It was a wonderful life because Prabhupada was there with them. And they got the encouragement from Prabhupada, although he didn't go out on the streets with them. Okay. Radio stations and newspapers took note of the Western devotees chanting in the street. One article appeared in the October 10th edition of Times of India. A group of Americans, including women with babes in arms, belonging to the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON, has been moving around Bombay during the past few days, chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, or Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, to the accompaniment of cymbals, castanets, and drums, mridangas. So this particular article, this is a beautiful picture of Prabhupada. The name of the article is Founder of Krishna Cult Feted. So feted is a word that we don't usually use in English. So the translation of feted, I don't even know if I'm saying it, if it's feted or feted. Feted means to be celebrated, honored, or greeted with great public praise. It is used when a person is treated like a star or VIP because of a big success. So the newspapers, they were very interested in what the devotees were doing, and they would take pictures of them meeting, for instance, Devanand. Devanand was a big movie director. He was the one who made that movie, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, and good or bad, everyone got to hear about Hare Krishna after that movie. And all these newspaper articles, 5 million people would read the newspaper and hear on the radio station like that. There wasn't television at that time. Television hadn't come yet. So Prabhupada, without his even endeavoring, the advertisements were automatically happening. Okay. Now, who can recognize the devotee in the center? Yes, that's Bhanu Swami. Bhanu Swami, he's Japanese. Although born in Canada, he was born to a Japanese family, and he joined Srila Prabhupada. He wasn't initiated yet at this point. In front of him is an African American, Dinanath. He was the Sankirtan leader. And then so many other devotees on Sankirtan here. This is part of the article. Can the materialistic West, or at any rate, a microscopic part of it, have turned at last to embrace the spiritualism of the East? I met several of the kirtan chanting Americans who have come here to attend the 7th All India Conference at the Bharat Sadhu Samaj, which begins here today, and was at once struck by their sincerity and utter surrender to the cult they have adopted. The Vaishnavas of Mathura could not be so guileless, I thought, as this band of bhakti enthusiasts. So the Indian community, they were impressed by the devotion and the enthusiasm of these foreign devotees. And that's why they were getting so much attention. There are lots of kirtan parties wandering around, begging in the streets, but nothing like our devotees. And they were getting all that inspiration from Srila Prabhupada. The sand of Chopati Beach was fine and clean. The audience numbered in the thousands. Sadhus sat on stage, Prabhupada and his followers among them. It was twilight. The sky above the Arabian Sea was cloudy, and a pleasant breeze was stirring. There had already been 2 lectures expounding the Mayavad philosophy, and now it was time for Prabhupada to speak, the last scheduled speaker of the evening. The audience was eager to hear him. His accomplishments in the West had caused great curiosity, especially now that he had arrived in Bombay and his devotees were chanting daily in public. Prabhupada's disciples, bored and exasperated by the preceding 2 hours of Hindi oratory, could scarcely wait any longer for Prabhupada to speak. But Prabhupada, instead of addressing the audience, turned to his disciples and said, "Begin chanting." Everyone was tired of the lectures. As soon as the devotees began the kirtan, little Saraswati stood and began to dance. Following her, the other devotees rose and began to dance. She was 3 years old at this time. As the kirtan came alive with mridangas and kartals, the dancing and chanting of the devotees seemed to disturb some of the sadhus on stage, who rose one by one and left. The audience, however, responded enthusiastically, many of them standing and clapping. After 5 minutes of ecstatic kirtan, the devotees spontaneously jumped down onto the sand and headed toward the audience. Thousands in the crowd rose to their feet and began to move along with the devotees in a dance, backward and forward. You can imagine thousands of people dancing with the devotees. Here they are. Indians began crying in uncontrolled happiness, overwhelmed by the genuine Krishna bhakti of these foreigners. Never before has such a thing happened. Policemen and press reporters joined in the chanting and dancing. Chopati Beach was in an uproar of Hare Krishna Kirtan, as Prabhupada and his disciples showed the potency of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. So these pictures are mostly being taken from Chasing Rhinos with the Swami by Shyamsundar Das Prabhu. Some of the pictures are from Guru Das, some of them are from the Prabhupada Lilamrita, but Shyamsundar, he was taking a lot of pictures at that time, and he caught this wonderful picture of when the devotees entered into the audience. Okay. After about 10 minutes, the kirtan ended, though a tumultuous unrest pervaded the talkative crowd. 15 minutes elapsed before all the people returned to their seats and the program could continue. Some devotees who had left the stage took their seats on the ground level, and others sat on stage with Prabhupada, by Prabhupada. Prabhupada's voice echoed over the public address system. Up either bit here. There you go. Now Prabhupada's he'll land a bombshell. Ladies and gentlemen, I was requested to speak in Hindi, but I am not very much accustomed to speak in Hindi. Therefore, the authorities in this meeting have allowed me to speak in English. I hope you will follow me because it is Bombay and most people will be speaking English. The problem is, as this evening's speaker, His Holiness Swami Akhandanandaji is our neighbor. He has a very large ashram just behind Sital Chai in that area. He also came to the grand opening of our temple. Our neighbor, but he's Mayavadi. So His Holiness Swami Akhandanandaji spoke to you how we can make everyone accustomed to take up good habits, sadachar. I think in this age, Kali Yuga, there are many faults. Prabhupada went on to explain the power of Lord Chaitanya's movement to clean the hearts of everyone. He referred to the two great rogues who Lord Chaitanya had delivered, Jagai and Madhai. Now we are saving wholesale Jagais and Madhais. Therefore, if we want peace, if we want to be situated on the Sadachar platform, then we must spread the Harinam Maha Mantra all over the world. And it has been practically proven. The American and European Vaishnavas who have come here, who have chanted Hare Krishna mantra, they were cow flesh eaters. They were drunkards. They were illicit sex mongers. They were all kinds of gamblers. But having taken to this Krishna consciousness movement, they have given up everything abominable. Sadachar has come automatically. They are no more meat eaters. They are no more gamblers. They are no more illicit sex mongers. They are no more intoxicators. They do not even take tea, and they do not even take coffee. They do not even smoke, which I think is very rare to be found in India. But they have given up. Why? Because they have taken to this Krishna consciousness. So this was quite bold of Srila Prabhupada. He wasn't describing the devotees as saints. He was openly speaking the truth that these young people that you see who are dancing and so much in love with this Krishna consciousness, what was their backgrounds? Wholesale Jaghai Madhai now being delivered. And this was quite surprising to this audience. Prabhupada ended his talk after about 5 minutes. I do not feel that I have to say very much. You can see what is the result of Krishna consciousness. It is not something artificial. It is there in everyone. I have not done anything magical. But this Krishna consciousness is present in all of us. We simply have to revive it. The audience responded with cheers and a great round of applause. Prabhupada, with greater force and eloquence than the long-winded Mayavadis, had shown the essence of spiritual life, ecstatic chanting of the holy names, and he had offered the living testimony of his American disciples. For the next week, Prabhupada and his disciples were the talk of Bombay, and they began receiving many invitations to speak and perform kirtan throughout the city. The Times Weekly's coverage of the Sadhu Samaj spotlighted the memorable presence of Srila Prabhupada and his disciples. A group of 20 Americans, members of the Hare Krishna delegation, took over the dais. The air was filled with the beating of mridangas, the clash of cymbals, and the music of the Maha Mantra. Swaying from side to side, their tufts of hair tossing in the breeze, they chanted, Hare Krishna. So this was a great relief for the audience. Rather than having to hear the drone of the Mayavadis describing the oneness, they got to experience the ecstatic chanting of Hare Krishna. They took part in the chanting, and they themselves were enlivened. And this made it very easy for Srila Prabhupada and his disciples to then go throughout Bombay and encourage people. And Prabhupada had a plan. He was going to change the format of preaching very soon after this Pandal program. One graying reporter, whom I had always regarded, this is a part of an article that was written, whom I had always regarded as a particularly unsentimental person, said to me in an emotion-choked voice, "Do you realize what is happening? Very soon Hinduism is going to sweep the West. The Hare Krishna movement will compensate for all our loss at the hands of padres through the centuries." So who knows what a padre is? The priest, yes, the Catholic and Christian priests who came here to convert the simple people of India, to convince them that their philosophy, their religion is barbaric, it's savage, and you should become civilized like the Western people of England, and you should take up Christianity. So the priests were called fathers, and in Portuguese, in Spanish, they're called padres. That's the word for fathers or priests. So this reporter, who was not a sentimental person, he was realizing that this is a great revival of our own culture. He called it Hinduism. We call it Sanatana Dharma. The word Hindu doesn't come from the Vedas. It comes from the Mughals, because the Sindhu River, you'll notice that they don't have S in the Arabic language. For instance, hapta, a week. We call it sapta. They call it hapta in Urdu because the S is not there. So the Sindhu River was separating the Mughals from India, from Bharat. And that Sindhu, it was called Hindu. So anyone on this side of the Sindhu River, they were called Hindus. But the word Hindu does not appear anywhere in the Vedas. So he called it Hinduism. Our Hinduism was going to sweep the West. Yes, it did, but not in the name of Hinduism, because Srila Prabhupada was not interested in converting people into Hinduism. He wanted to reestablish Sanatana Dharma, the eternal occupation of the living entity. About 25 newsmen came to a press conference on the 5th floor of Mr. Seksadia's residence. Prabhupada sat with his disciples on a large mattress and answered questions, and the devotees showed a film of the San Francisco Rath Yatra. The reporters asked about New Vrindavan. They questioned the devotees. Why have they become sadhus? Why had they left their country? They were very curious because They wanted to become like the Americans. Now it's not so, but the American dream has become a nightmare now. But in the 60s and now the 70s, this is the 70s by this time, anyone who was educated, they wanted to go to America. If they couldn't go to America, then they would go to England. If they couldn't go to England, then they would go to Australia or Germany. But top on the list was America because it was the most materialistic. So they couldn't understand, why have you given up America and come to our poor country? They couldn't understand the wealth of their own culture. And these Western devotees were showing them by practical example that we have adopted your culture because it's the best culture in the whole world. The next day, the press was full of stories of Prabhupada because there were 25 newspaper men at that press conference and his movement. The Times of India picked up on a particular angle. U.S. millionaire son seeks solace in Krishna consciousness. So who was that millionaire son? Giriraj. That's right. There he is. The article told of Giriraj's renouncing his father's wealth to join Prabhupada's movement. One newspaper quoted Giriraj, "My father works hard and earns fabulous money. He also fights with my mother. Thus, in spite of material comforts, nobody is happy." Quoting Shyam Sundar, "My father is very rich, but he has to take sleeping tablets every night." And there were other articles. So many of these devotees, practically all the devotees who came from America and Europe, they were educated. They came from wealthy families. They had good families. They had good education. They were attractive. The four different. There's wealth. There's family aristocracy. There's education, and there's beauty. So those four things, when you're elevated in human life, those four things become prominent. And the disciples of Prabhupada had all of those things. They came from wealthy families. In fact, Giriraj, his father, he offered him that if you give up this Krishna consciousness, I'll give you millions of dollars. And Giriraj refused. Instead, he wanted to come with Prabhupada. So that's the type of disciples that Srila Prabhupada collected in America. Shyam Sundar also, so many of these devotees coming from wealthy families, good education, and they used it all in Prabhupada's service. Okay. Now the movie that the devotees showed the newspaper men was of the 1970 Rath Yatra in Golden Gate Parkway in San Francisco. 3 huge, gigantic carts, 10,000 people following the carts, and at the end they had a huge prasad distribution for 10,000 people. So this was just amazing that the newspaper men saw this, what was going on in America. What to speak of a sadhu sammelan with thousands of people in Chopati. Same thing was going on in America. Soon letters appeared in the letters column of the Times of India. And these are some of the letters. As far as my knowledge goes, these foreign Hindus of the Hare Krishna movement cannot be equal to the native original Brahmins and Hindus. They will have to be relegated to the lower castes. It is significant to see one of the newly converted sadhus, Sri Gopal Das, that's our Gopal Das who just went back to Godhead, formerly Charles Poland of Chicago, stated that he was a construction worker formerly. Doing Sudra's work, It would thus become necessary to allot the 3 lower castes to these foreign converts according to their profession. So not everyone was impressed by the devotees. Another layer go back to that one because Gopal's in that picture. Okay. Here's Gopal dancing just behind Prabhupada. This is at the San Francisco Rath Yatra. So Prabhupada personally asked Gopal to come to India to join him. And now he's gone back to Godhead. Okay? Right. Another letter stated, the Hare Krishna movement is just a sporadic fad of sentimentalists. Prabhupada said these letters should be answered, and he personally outlined replies, delegating their writing to specific disciples. Within a few days, Prabhupada's replies appeared in the press. In India, even amongst the Brahmins in different provinces, there was no social intercourse. You had the Brahmins in the south, you had the Brahmins in the north, you had the Brahmins in Bengal. They never intermingled. They had their own society, their own way of doing their worship. There was no social intercourse amongst them. So if they are socially accepted or not, doesn't matter. For example, amongst the qualified legal practitioners in different provinces, there may not be social intercourse, but that does not mean they are not qualified lawyers. This is a cultural movement, and if the whole world accepts this cult, even though Indian Brahmins do not accept it, will do no harm at all. We are not striving for social or political unity, but if Krishna consciousness is accepted, there will automatically be political, social, and religious unity. So this is the way Srila Prabhupada countered the fact that they were saying that it was a sporadic fad of sentimentalists. In other words, Prabhupada is saying, we don't care what you think. This is going on now all over the world, and this is what's going to bring peace in the world, not your opinion. The fact that one of our boys was a construction worker does not mean that he belongs to the Sudra community. The Sudra community is the less intelligent class or illiterate class who have no information of the value of life. In America, even the highest cultured and educated person can go to work as an ordinary construction worker because they accept the dignity of labor. So although a boy was working as a construction worker in America, he is not a Sudra. But even if he is accepted as a Sudra, Lord Krishna says that anyone who comes to him is eligible to be elevated to the highest position of going back to home, back to Godhead. And Prabhupada, of course, was referring to the sloka in the Bhagavad-Gita 9:32. Mam hi partha vyapasritya ye pishyu papayonaya striyo vaishyas tata sudras tepi yanti param gatim. O son of Pritha, those who take shelter in me, though they be of low birth, women, Vaishyas, merchants, as well as Sudras, workers, can approach the supreme destination. I'll read the purport. It is clearly declared here by the Supreme Lord that in devotional service there is no distinction between the lower or higher classes of people. In the material conception of life, there are such divisions. But for a person engaged in transcendental devotional service to the Lord, there are not. Everyone is eligible for the supreme destination. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated that even the lowest who are called chandalas, dog eaters. Has anyone ever met a dog eater? Yes, we have dog eaters in our society. Yes, we do. Filipinos, Japanese, Koreans, they're all dog eaters by culture. In India, also in Nagaland, right? Right. They're breaking up the dog farms now. So, but we welcome them. We embrace them. Correct? We have so many temples in Philippines, Korea. We have our Korean Bhagavad-Gita. In China, although it's against the law, preaching like anything in China. And they were previously dog eaters, chandalas. Therefore, devotional service and guidance of a pure devotee are so strong that there is no discrimination between the lower and higher classes of men. Anyone can take to it. The most simple man taking center of the pure devotee can be purified by proper guidance. According to the different modes of material nature, men are classified in the mode of goodness, Brahmins, mode of passion, Kshatriyas or administrators, the mixed modes of passion and ignorance, Vaishyas or merchants, and the mode of ignorance, Sudras or workers. Those lower than them are called chandalas, and they are born in sinful families. Generally, those who are born in sinful families are not accepted by the higher classes. But the process of devotional service and the pure devotee of the Supreme God are so strong that all the lower classes can attain the highest perfection of life. This is possible only when one takes center of Krishna. One has to take center completely of Krishna. Then one can become much greater than great Gyanis and yogis. So Srila Prabhupada was speaking from Shastra, from the Bhagavad-Gita. This is spoken directly by the Supreme Lord, that even those of lower birth, including the Sudras, Prabhupada once made a comparison that when he first came to America, America was so wealthy compared to India at that time. He said that the construction workers in America make more money than our ministers in India, which is very true. Construction workers can make, nowadays, I don't know, $20 an hour? You know, that's pretty good. Because it's the dignity of labor. Whatever you're doing, you do it in a dignified manner, and then you're respected, even if you're a construction worker. So this completely, of course, they didn't accept it because they wanted to maintain their hierarchy, but Srila Prabhupada proved by Shastra that anyone can attain the supreme perfection. All right, we'll continue next week. Hare Krishna. Jai.
Hare Krishna, Krishna